Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
And welcome back to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute, a podcast where we celebrate the films of Gene Wilder 1 minute at a time. In our opening season, we have been looking at the film Young Frankenstein. I'm your host, I'm Alan Sanders.
And I'm your co-host, Walt Murray.
And joining us today for the first time, midweek here, we've got a podcaster himself of one of the Movies by Minutes, one of the Rocky Minute podcasters. We've got Doug Greenberg joining us. Doug, welcome.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Great to have you here, and you've got a franchise that's awesome. You're certainly going to have your handful with all of the different Rocky movies, especially if you then spill into some of the latest Creed movie franchises.
Well, we plan on continuing with Creed, but if they keep making these movies, just like the Star Wars Minute, guys, looks like we're going to be going forever.
Yeah, I don't know whether your franchise is getting better as we go or not. So, it may get rougher as you go along.
No, I liked Creed. I thought it was a pretty good separate movie to kind of continue the story, but from a different perspective. A couple of almost hokey moments, but for the most part, I enjoyed it.
It was better than the last couple, in my opinion.
Yeah, they have to be careful about how they handle it, because the Rocky legend is so cherished that if they mess up the formula, you can argue and say, well, Creed is a different franchise all on its own, separate from Rocky, because it's, doesn't focus on Rocky Balboa. But I don't know if they screw with the formula too much and go off the rails, I think you're going to turn off a lot of fans.
Well, it's something that they're going to have to be keeping an eye on, because the first couple of Rocky installments as a kid, I really loved. Then it started to get to your typical late 80s, early 90s, everything's better with a montage, and every one of those had to have one of those. And I thought I started to get a little bit better toward the end, recognizing old age settling in, having to find a new boxer. And yeah, we'll see how you guys do, because I love the first movie, and I still to this day am amazed that Sly Stallone was able to sit in his room for about 3 days straight and banged out that script. And that may be one of the things that's best for his career.
Yeah, that definitely was his launching point. I mean, all the hard work that he put into just getting Rocky off the ground. I mean, it kind of, after the first one, it really took off from there. I mean, they went on a shoestring budget for the first one, but after Rocky 2, they had more money thrown at them. And then 3 and 4 and beyond, it was like, whatever you want, Sly, you got it. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, because, I think we can all agree that the best stuff came from that shoestring budget of the first one.
Yeah, and I think really once you get through about the third or fourth, it really changes a lot. It does not have the same feel as the first couple.
Not at all. And probably the least favored one is Rocky 5, but when he came back and did Rocky Balboa, like 15 or 16 years later, it was kind of like he wanted to go back to the roots of how the feel of the original Rocky. So I guess that was kind of his Rocky Balboa send off, and I thought he did it with dignity. I like Rocky Balboa a lot.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to make sure we had a chance to kind of get our audience level set to who we've got joining us here on Hump Day, which we affectionately love calling out thanks to Igor. He's got a traveling hump, and it's Hump Day for us. Let's start midweek here with a scene that we just left yesterday. We finished up the scene with the little girl playing her Superman act, and as we ended minute 67 yesterday, we actually faded into a blind man praying, and that's where we start today, a blind man on his knees with what looks to be a rosary in hand, and we'll end this minute with, "Forgive me, I didn't realize you were a mute," and we'll have to figure out what he's trying to say at the end. So let's start as we often do at the very beginning. At the very beginning, we've got some very sad music playing. It's a rendition of Ave Maria in the background. We don't yet recognize that apparently this blind man needs his own audio background for praying, but he is in the midst of prayer.
Yeah, and it's an interesting scene because he's obviously a weathered, gray-haired guy, long beard, and it wasn't until later on that I realized who this was. After watching it a few times, and I was like, "Wait a minute, that's another Gene."
Yes, it's not Gene Wilder.
Gene Hackman. And, by this point in his career, Gene Hackman arguably was probably the biggest star in this movie. And he has just a, short 3 or 4.5 minute scene. But this was kind of a big land to get Hackman in this one.
I agree totally. Like, I didn't realize that it was Gene Hackman at first. Like, I've seen the Superman movie 100 times before I ever saw Young Frankenstein. So Gene Hackman was well in my consciousness, but I had no idea this was him. He plays this with the beard and the makeup and everything. And you can't tell me that this scene is supposed to feel like 1974.
Oh, no.
Not at all. Nothing. And we've discussed this. And if you have gone back and listened to any of the earlier episodes, the only time we're in 1974 is at the very beginning. And then every now and then we have a call out to something that could only exist in, quote, modern times. But for the most part,
right.
We're in a 1931 picture that is trying to recapture something turn of the century, old Frankenstein, universal picture.
The thing I love about this scene is like the classic I can't catch a break comedy scene, where everything goes wrong. The guy's just trying to get a little sustenance and he just can't make it happen. I love this, man.
Oh yeah,
this is my favorite scene in the movie.
This whole scene that we're going to cover over the next, the next few minutes, we're going to have a few days with your time here to try to make sure we digest this scene. But it's interesting, Walt, when the movie first came out, as per the requirement of Gene Hackman, he didn't want anybody to, be like, oh my God, Gene Hackman's in this. Right. He wasn't even credited.
Yeah, which is crazy because he was coming off. I mean, he had done The French Connection and so many other films. I mean, by this point in his career, he had been a top of the list star for a while, and arguably was at the peak of his career, even though his peak has been a long peak. But yeah, I think that would have put people in their seats and gotten attention if they had put Gene Hackman's name on the billboard.
And what's funny is we've talked to folks who, when they were first seeing this movie, had no idea that this was Gene Hackman. Even though his voice is so recognizable to us now, nobody knew. The makeup, the hair, everything about the scene, that the most audiences didn't even realize it was Gene Hackman, and it helped that he wasn't credited for that very reason.
After the fact, you look and you're like, yeah, of course that's Gene Hackman. But when you're watching it, because the way he talks, like he's so Gene Hackman, but when you're watching it and you're, involved in the Frankenstein aspect of it and the monster and everything, you're not really, you think he's just an actor doing a scene. You don't focus on the fact that it's Gene Hackman.
No, you don't. Although what's really funny about this is Gene Wilder and Gene Hackman met when they did Bonnie and Clyde.
I was about to say, yeah.
And so they were in that picture together, and Gene Hackman and Gene Wilder became tennis buddies, and they would hang out and play tennis. And it just sort of came to pass that Gene Hackman said, I've never really tried my hand at comedy or doing something funny. I'm not, I'm kind of that dramatic actor, but I'd kind of like to try it sometime. And it just so happened that's when Gene Wilder was throwing around the idea of Young Frankenstein. And they just said, well, back and forth conversations. And it turned out, hey, if you've got a small thing, maybe something I can do, if you got room. Well, how do you say no to Gene Hackman, right?
Right.
So I think this is really a cool behind the scenes moment of how, again, these actors are also friends. They met each other on a previous picture. They play tennis together. It's hard to think of actors sometimes as having actual like normal lives, just getting out, having a drink, having dinner, going to play tennis, just, chew the fat. And for it to come up like, hey, if you just, I'm not asking for, a big part or anything, but if you got something, it'd be fun to try.
Yeah.
And it's a perfect part in scene for him.
Oh, it is. It is. And he plays it so well. And one of the things that we've talked about, Doug, is that it's a lot tougher for a serious actor to do comedy well than it is for a comedy actor to do serious well. And
just look at the movie Airplane, right?
Airplane is a great example. And even some of the serious actors there, even though they were in a comedy, were playing their parts very seriously.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what made it
deadpan.
Funny. Yeah, absolutely. And but Hackman really plays this part to a T. I mean, he is exactly what they needed for this part.
Yeah,
I buy that he's blind.
Well, what I was going to say, if we go back and we start looking and we try to do this for folks that may not have rewatched it recently, we sort of try to remind people what's happening in this minute. It starts off with this blind man on his knees. We think maybe a priest. It's never really called out because he is wearing a cross. He looks like he's wearing like a cassock or something, almost like an Eastern Orthodox or Russian Orthodox priest or something. He doesn't have a typical rosary. It's a different style of rosary, but he's got prayer beads in his hand.
And he's got a cross on the wall.
Right, and there is a cross on the wall, but there isn't a figure on it. So it's a cross versus a crucifix, which is, again, a distinction. If there's a...
So he'd be a Protestant.
See, if the figure of Jesus is on it, then it's a crucifix. Otherwise, it's a cross.
Right.
So we start off, and if you look when they first set up the scene, because we just had this really silly moment of the girl playing Superwoman and flying into her room, thanks to playing teeter-totter with Frankenstein, or with the creature. We fade to this. We hear the music. We know that this is a lone cabin in the woods. So we're kind of shifting completely away from the day scene to now an evening scene. And we hear the sad music, Ave Maria. We see the blind man on his knees. His eyes are kind of fluttering around like he's praying to the heavens. So I don't think, at least when I remember seeing it, I didn't sense he was blind right away.
Yeah, I can't remember where I caught it. I think it was when he was walking across the room.
Maybe when he goes to him and realizes that he doesn't recognize that it's a monster. That kind of that clued me in.
That would be a giveaway. Yeah.
At what point does he reveal that he's blind? Is it? It's not when he's praying.
He does say when he's praying. He does say,
"Blind man, like some companionship or something like that."
Yeah,
right?
a visitor is all I ask, a temporary companion just to help me pass a few short hours of my lonely life. He says that. And then the door bursts open and we hear, "Oh, thank you," like up to God. And then he says, "Don't speak, don't say a word." And then he goes over, he goes, "My joy, my happiness, my prize from heaven. Oh my, you must have been the tallest one in your class. My name is Harold and I live here all alone. What is your name?" And he goes, I'm sorry I didn't get that.
As he's feeling him up.
So he has yet to say that he's a blind man because he will say it in the next minute. But up until this point, he's like, "Oh, forgive me. I didn't realize you were a And that's where we stop.
Well, and you do see when he gets up off of his knees and he reaches over for the record player before he scrapes the needle across the record. He is kind of looking off, a point beyond him and reaching, trying to feel for the record player. So there are a couple of indications.
There are indications, but again, the first time seeing it, you don't realize he's blind. I didn't clue in that he must be blind when he doesn't react to the monster in the doorway.
Right.
He's just happy, and then his head is not really looking at the creature eye to eye, and he's just feeling it with his hands. I was like, okay, this guy must be sight impaired, and then it will be confirmed in the next minute. But for now, you get the sense once he finally makes his way over to the creature, there's no way this guy knows who's at the front door.
No.
Right. So I guess it's supposed to be more inferred from the way he's looking around and the way he's fumbling around.
Right.
Okay.
Now, in this, I want to ask this question because he makes an interesting line. He says something interesting here. He says, "Oh my, you must have been the tallest one in your class." To me, that's just a hysterical line.
Oh, it's great.
Like, how you greet somebody, and that's the first thing you think to say. You were the tallest kid in school.
I guess first, I find it funny that he's just feeling the monster up. He's grabbing his shoulders, his chest. He's like kind of tracing his body with his hands.
Now, easy, Doug. This is a family show. When you're feeling the monster up, let's be very clear.
You're right. I did sign the waiver. Supposed to keep it clean.
I mean, he'll play maybe with the monster Schwanstucker later in a different way, but not
Possibly.
right this moment.
So I didn't realize this, but Hackman is 6'2".
Hackman is a tall dude.
I never realized that. I always thought he was a average or shorter guy, but he's big in his own right, and of course, Peter Boyle is about 6 or 8 inches taller than him.
Well,
in costume.
I think what they did with this scene, because of how tall Gene Hackman is as an actor, you never see once Gene Hackman comes into the scene for the 2-shot. You've got Peter Boyle more than likely sitting on an apple cart just to make sure he's that much taller.
Probably.
To try to continue to show how much bigger this creature is than anybody else in the room. Because standing at 6'5" in costume, there wouldn't be that much of a height discrepancy between him and Gene Hackman.
Yeah, so he's either on an apple cart or an apple wagon. We're not sure which. One of the two.
The age-old debate.
Don't do that again. In film terminology, it's an apple cart. And trust me, being a short little walker? Yeah, I'm always on an apple cart. I'm saying, can we get you to stand on this? I'm like, okay, guys, really? Fine. It'd be better for the shot if you look taller than the girl you're supposed to be kissing. Okay. Whatever. I like being boob level. I mean,
that height isn't. Well, yeah. Hey, there are some advantages.
There's nothing wrong with that. But when you ask somebody, I want to go back to this comment about tallest kid in class. I get that if you're in school, or maybe if you're talking to a kid who's in school. How do you leap as an adult to assuming your visitor was the tallest kid in class? That's just like something so odd to say.
Yeah, but it is such a great, funny line, though. I mean,
but I don't go walk up today to a tall dude and go, "Wow, I bet you were the tallest kid in class." Yeah.
Now, I will after this, but
now it's you jump right to, oh, you must have played basketball.
Well, that's okay. Yeah, I was going to say, do you jump to the next thing and say, "Well, did you play basketball?"
Yeah. That's, I mean, maybe back in '74 it was. You must have been the tallest kid in class.
Yeah. I mean, I would think when you're filling out this guy's shoulders and everything, you'd be like, did you play football or something like that?
Yeah.
But
yeah, he doesn't. He's wide as a trailer. I mean,
I know he's not just tall. He's broad. He's big.
Definitely a linebacker here.
Yeah, I mean, he
defensive end.
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny. This kind of reminds me. My wife and I were staying at a hotel one night, and we were in kind of a long story, but we were in the like luxury suite area, and I don't know how we snuck into that, but we're having breakfast, and all of a sudden, the sun's kind of coming up behind the building, and the sun's coming through the door, and all of a sudden everything just goes dark. And I look over, and it's Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I need your clothes, your boots, and your motorcycle.
And he's just walked through the door. That guy is gigantic. I mean, that goes without saying, but I really didn't realize how big he is. I mean, he is monstrous. He just blotted the sun out when he walked through. And it's kind of like this scene that Peter Boyle just kind of is so big, he just takes over the whole room, really. I mean, he's just giant. And that space that Schwarzenegger filled is kind of the same thing. It's like there's no mistaking who this is.
You know what's funny, though? You mentioned that about Arnold Schwarzenegger. I had an opposite reaction when he came in. He was debuting a movie, and he was going to come on the Fox NFL pregame show. Those guys are huge.
Those are big guys.
Because they all stood about a foot taller than him.
Wow.
And I was like, that's the first time I've ever seen Arnold Schwarzenegger look kind of short compared to people around him. No less, fit.
Yeah, sure.
But I was like, holy crap, these guys are tall.
Well, and he's probably 6'1".
Are monsters.
Yeah, they are. Well, and my wife still cringes because, of course, I'm shoving down bear claws like there's no tomorrow. And, here's Schwarzenegger with 14 pounds of fruit on his plate. And I'm like, hey, if you need any workout tips, give me a holler. And
well, you've kind of
doing a math problem.
You've kind of fit into that whole middle-age trap of, well, we can't grow any taller, so we might as well grow wider.
Just got to grow some way.
What I like about what we're seeing here is it's establishing that because this character of the blind man has no idea who's at his door, and he's so wanting company that he's just willing to immediately accept that the Lord has answered his prayer. So it made me want to ask, have you ever prayed for something and not got what exactly you thought you were supposed to get? Because I'm not sure that eventually that this was what he would really wanted at the door.
This is a little curveball.
I guess getting something is better than praying for something and getting nothing, which, in my experience.
Well, true. I don't know. Maybe you need to re-examine your relationship with the Lord.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, there have been some interesting kind of spiritual things in this movie. We talked about how during the reanimation scene, he was basically kind of taking his place as God.
Oh, Dr. Frankenstein.
Dr. Frankenstein. And then we had kind of the imagery of Christ as being lifted up. Well, I was kind of thinking about this last night and somewhat thinking about the same question. And in a way, both people got what they needed here. That the blind man got a friend for a minute and got some companionship, and then the monster got, well, he sort of gets what he needs, but same way for him, that he's got somebody who's kind of going to be a caretaker for him for a minute.
So. He becomes subdued for like the first time, where he's not in a rage.
No, in fact, he even, which again, we don't want to jump ahead too much because we want to save something for the coming minutes, but even his fear of fire is somewhat tempered in this scene with the blind man.
Well,
Right.
and I think it's funny too when the blind man is kind of like feeling how big he is and starting to talk to him. Peter Boyle has kind of a look on his face like, what the heck's going on here? Like kind of a dumbfounded look of.
That's one of my notes. He just looks a little confused when Harold starts feeling him up.
Yeah, he sure didn't scare him. And
No.
Not considering how he burst through the door. And did you notice, I mean, I guess this would be something that you would have on, because again, if there's no electricity, you don't have a doorbell, but would you normally have a shop bell on the inside of your door frame to let you know, hey, someone's here. Ding, ding. Are you open for business?
Yeah, I guess as a blind person, you.
What is he selling?
Yeah.
If this is a shop.
Yeah, I was wondering that too. It's like I guess being blind though, maybe no, but knocking would do the very same point.
Maybe he doesn't want. Maybe the kid. Oh, maybe that's it. The Transylvania kids are always playing pranks on him, sneaking into his house, rearranging his furniture.
Yep.
So he stuck a bell up there.
So you want that bell to know.
So that way he's like, oh, someone's in here. I can hear ya.
But it would make sense if you're blind that you would want to know if somebody comes through that door.
Don't you develop more of an acute sense of hearing when you lose sight? Or don't we hear about how one of the other senses usually takes over?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that he would put that little Tinkerbell kind of shop bell doorbell on the inside of his door.
I don't know. I've lost common sense, but that doesn't seem. I don't seem to have made up for it any other way.
You and a lot of people. You're not the only one.
Once again, I go back. Maybe it's just sheer size.
Yeah. Could be.
Which I shouldn't say anything because Walt could just destroy me if he wanted
And
to.
I will be momentarily.
We need a break. Excuse me while I pummel my host.
We're going to straighten this out right now.
Some of that elevator like waiting music while Walt beats you down.
And we're back.
You got the little girl from Ipanema playing in the background here.
Technical difficulties.
Little test pattern. Well, while Peter Boyle, or the creature, definitely has that look of, you're not reacting as I expect, this is actually now 2 scenes back to back where the creature is being shown that both the youth and the elderly seem to be much more accepting of him than everybody that's been in Dr. Frankenstein's age range. So far, he's watched, him, being yelled at. He's been argued. He's been introduced to fire. He's only been around people basically between, I guess, Inga being the youngest in that group of 4 in the castle and Frau Blucher, the oldest, but basically hasn't seen a kid and hasn't seen anybody technically elderly like we're seeing here. And we're seeing kind of story-wise, it's an interesting comment to think about. The girl accepted him and played with him, and he was okay with it and was equally kind of confused that the girl didn't run away. He comes bursting in the door here. I was like, oh, thank you. It's like, wait, what do you mean, thank you?
Right. That lends the confusion on his face.
But this goes to, I think, what we continue to mention about why this movie is so good. Even with the comedy playing out, we're watching, and if you look at it from the elements of storytelling and drama, the creature is learning, not everybody hates you. Not everybody immediately dismisses you. In fact, they want your companionship. They want to play with you. And I think this is what's going to help make the scene later, which I don't want to jump too far ahead, but a scene later when Dr. Frankenstein himself has to come to grips with what an amazing creature he can be, that creature can accept it because he's witnessed in real life. It's not just words now. He can say, well, you know what? A kid did treat me very well. An old man, for the most part, treated me well. But, he certainly didn't go run away screaming or try to kill me.
Well, and it's kind of funny that you say that. We've been around. We were foster parents and then adopted a couple kids, and have been around a lot of kids with special needs and things like that. And one of the things that has always impressed me with kids and people in general with special needs is that they're very accepting of people. They're not pretentious. They don't care what you look like, how old you are, whatever. If you're nice to them, they love you. So there, kind of a little bit of that with this oversized, monster that you see him trying to sort through, what it is going on here. And, here's a child and then now a blind man who who do just kind of accept him for who he is.
And we should also remember the comment we made that when he first came to life, he had a very newborn style of just walking around, learning how to walk. He's very, very childlike as well. And so now we're seeing not just childlike, but a very simple child. Obviously, an abnormal brain.
Right.
I use the phrase childlike a few times in my notes, but it's like that need for companionship is one of the most basic instinctual needs that we have.
And what's cool about this is, as much as you get the sense that had this person reacted negatively, that the monster would have kept roaring and screaming and yelling, it was disarming to the creature to have somebody immediately become accepting of him again, just like the girl did. And he's willing to sit there and listen. Mm-hmm. He's willing to let this person kind of put hands all over him and kind of lean on him and shh, don't talk.
Yeah.
And I think it's great. It makes for I'm interested now in what's going to happen with this relationship. I'm once again kind of with the little girl, because with the little girl, as we talked about earlier, Walt, that it was an allusion to the girl that Frankenstein's creature in the original 1931 picture said, oh, well, maybe you want to swim in the water, and doesn't know any better, and she ends up drowning. We immediately had the dread of the well earlier this week and realized, okay, he's not going to drown her, but we had that moment of like, oh, what's he going to do with this innocent little creature or little girl? Instead, they end up playing on the seesaw together, and she goes flying through the air with the greatest of ease. But now we've got the scene here where, once again, he's okay being manhandled a little bit, as Doug said, felt up, you know? He's okay. And so it's, to me, I want to see this play out. I'm now as an audience member going, the creature can't be all bad. We just saw him take care of the little girl, want to play with the girl, even though he wasn't aware of his weight and size. And now he's talking to this old man. Let's give the creature, you know, maybe he's not evil.
Well, and I think it's an interesting way they wrote this scene, too, that you have, you know, the old blind man doing his thing. And when the creature breaks through the door, you kind of expect him to just start tearing the room apart and, you know, to be the Frankenstein monster. But instead, we kind of get this curveball thrown at us again of exactly the opposite of what you expect happening. And I think it's just masterful and genius on the part of Gene Wilder and the other writers and Mel Brooks and his directing.
Now, I'm going to go to Doug's comment here about feeling up the monster, which we were kind of playing with a little bit earlier.
You love that term.
I do.
Like, you lit up when he said that.
I did. I was all aglow. Well, now being married with 4 kids, it's a phrase that's never used in my... I don't see myself saying it either in telling a story or in asking for anything. I'm not allowed, not anymore. I'm like, don't you touch me. That's what I get a lot more of the don't you touch me.
Sounds right.
And Doug has created a monster introducing that term to our show.
There is, though, a line that was dropped out. I don't know if they dropped it out during, because this looks like one continuous take, so it looks like they may have cut it from the script. But in the original script, when the blind man goes over to the monster, the first 2 lines are exactly correct. Don't speak. Don't say a word. Then, in the script, he says, just let me touch you. Let me feel you. Let me hold you. Let me smell you.
Wow.
Let me smell your recently...
Did it get hot in here?
Yes, hold on. Let me light a cigarette in here. Once again, things I've never said in the last 20 years. And then it jumps to, after the whole, let me smell you, then there's a pause, my joy, my happiness, my prize from heaven. So that middle part, I'm kind of glad they took it out because it may have conveyed, even for maybe because of a 1974 audience, it may have had a little bit more innuendo than what the filmmakers were intending for this.
Have. Yeah, baby!
Because I do think they do mean it as a friend, hey, you've sent me a companion.
Absolutely.
Not someone, you know, not a woman of the evening. I mean a friend.
Right. Which is really what he wanted.
Right.
I love it when, I don't know if you want to call comedic timing or what, when Gene Hackman asks, what's your name? And, the monster just goes, he goes, just without a pause or confusion, he leans in. He goes, I didn't get that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't get that.
Yeah, that was great.
And it's so genuine. It's genuine. And what I love is when he does it again, even though he's blind, the almost wide-eyed realization, oh, forgive me. I didn't realize you were a moot. Whatever that is. What's a moot?
A moop, a more,
a minion.
Where is this going?
Where is it going?
I have no idea.
Well, we're going to have to continue this discussion, obviously, into the next minute. But before we do, I always like to try to make sure we haven't forgotten anything in this particular minute of Young Frankenstein. We've got our guest here, Doug Greenberg. Doug, any comments you have or any notes that we did not quite get to for minute number 68?
Well, I just want to, with the phonograph in the background, I want to shout out New Jersey native Thomas Edison for inventing it, 1877. There we go.
I like it. And what I like is as well, I never thought to do this. Maybe when my mom, being raised a good Catholic, made us, say the rosary growing up, maybe if she had put some of this music on in the background, I would have felt a little bit better about it. Instead of saying, Mom, it's still sunny out.
Instead of feeling like torture.
I was such a horrible kid. What the heck are we going to say the rosary for? I could go outside and get in mud puddles and stuff.
Well, as a good Presbyterian, I could claim him except for the rosary, because you got everything else. You got the cross, the wine, the cigars, throwing a little roughhousing, and you've got a good Presbyterian there.
Yeah, definitely not a Catholic in this house. He's a Christian, but
some sort of Orthodox.
Some Orthodox, yes.
Yeah.
I love the cassock. Look at that. I don't know if is it that or is it a Snuggie? I can't tell.
It was the first Snuggie.
The first Snuggie. It actually zipped up in the back.
Took a little while to catch on, but
it wasn't until somebody said, "If we put it on TV, it'll sell like hotcakes."
It does look nice and cozy, doesn't it?
It does. It really does.
I think we should probably. My daughter actually has a Snuggie. We bought her one, and she loves it. Loves it. I'm like, it's a blanket with sleeves.
Yeah, with sleeves, yeah, exactly.
Gosh.
But anyway, all right. Walt, do you have anything with this minute that we missed?
No, I think we've covered it, and I'm kind of excited for the next minute.
Yeah, I want to find out exactly what he thinks he is. I didn't realize you were we're going to have to figure out what that is, so we want everyone to certainly come back tomorrow. But before I tell you what's coming up tomorrow, Doug, we started off talking a little bit about the Rocky Minute, but you've also been guest on many other podcasts, so let me give you a chance to give a shout out to your own Movies by Minutes podcast and any other ones that you think might be worth checking out.
I think they're all worth checking out. Moviesbyminutes.com. Start from the top and just work your way down. Rocky Minute, you can find us. We have a listeners page, Mighty Mix. It's the name of the gym, Mickey's Gym, where Rocky works out. We're part of the dueling genre empire. So duelinggenre.com. Go there and you can check us out. And there's other minute-by-minute shows and just other podcasts that are just based around entertainment, TV shows, and movies and stuff. So go check it all out. It's good stuff over there. Duelinggenre.com.
Awesome. Walt, somebody wants to learn a little bit more about where to find, what we do when we're not broadcasting these podcasts, where we're in midst of discussions of any kind. Where can we go?
The best place to start with us is, as we've mentioned a few other times,
Dear Lord!
It's habit, man. It is habit. TheWilderRide.com is the best place to find us. And from there, you're going to find links to our Patreon page, to our Facebook page, and to our listeners group, which are great places to stay in touch with us.
And I want to give a quick plug to Tara Bain, who is an associate producer via the Patreon page. Thank you very much, Tara, for being a supporter of the show. As an associate producer level, she gets a shout out a couple times each and every month. And we appreciate that, Tara, for making this show one of the things that you wanted to support financially. We thank you.
Thank you, Tara.
So come back tomorrow, Thursday, if you're just hearing us for the first time. If you're catching us up in the middle of binge listening, well, this is coming out on a Thursday. We will come back here. We will continue the conversation where we will see how, the blind man is saying, you see how heaven plans, and we will end with, soup in a lap. And we have to figure out, what does soup in a lap mean? I don't know if it's not the lady's name. We're not bringing Soup to come in and give a lap, so we're going to have to find out what's going on. So you're going to have to come on back tomorrow for this, The Wilder Ride.
And find out more about Weird Gene Hackman.
What's that? I didn't get that.
That must have been the biggest growl in your class.
You think I'm tall? You should see the size of my feet.
One's